Well, we are less than 24 hours away from President Trump's deadline, where he's expected to announce tariffs on nearly every U.S. trading partner. And right now, a federal appeals court is weighing in on whether or not those tariffs are legal. Scripps News White House reporter Jacob Garden-Schwartz is live for us in our D.C. newsroom. And Jacob, what were some of the main takeaways? You were in the courtroom earlier today as the attorneys were arguing. What are some of the major takeaways that you had from what happened earlier today in the courtroom?
Yeah, good afternoon, Andrew. Just to set the scene, this was the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, so that is the appellate court from the Court of International Trade that had ruled earlier this year that the president's tariffs, at least some of them, did not rely on the proper authorities, were not lawful. After that ruling came down, the Justice Department appealed, and that got us to where we are today. So the central question in this case is, does IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, quite a mouthful, give the president the power to impose tariffs? According to the statute, it gives him the power to, quote, regulate international commerce. So the question is really, do tariffs amount to regulations? And as you might imagine, there were quite a bit of legal back and forths in the courtroom about what the meaning of the law was when it was written in the 70s, what previous cases have said about this, all of those sorts of things. It's certainly, the justices had tough questions for both sides. Again, in this case, there are really two groups of plaintiffs challenging the tariffs. One is a group of small businesses that import things from overseas, and another is a group of states that are represented by Democrats who are challenging these tariffs. They sparred really as to whether regulate amounts to imposing tariffs, but the justices certainly appeared skeptical of the Justice Department's arguments. And one of the key reasons there is that even if the White House, even if the Trump administration is able to argue that this law does give the president the ability to impose tariffs, it's not clear that he's done so in a proper way. If he is able to impose tariffs, they have to be done so under unusual or extreme circumstances. And of course, as we've heard Trump say repeatedly, these tariffs are aimed, at least the reciprocal ones, at rectifying trade imbalances, some of which have existed for decades. And so the plaintiffs had say, well, you know, if we've had trade imbalances with some of these nations for decades, why is it that it's a national emergency at this very moment? Again, it may be the case that we never even get to that question. If the judges agree with the lower court that this law doesn't give the president the power to impose these tariffs altogether, then that's all it said and done right there. This case gets upheld and the tariffs are struck down. We did not get a ruling from the justices yet. We are certainly waiting to see what they say. Andrew?
Yeah, and Jacob, we have that midnight deadline fast approaching. What comes next in this case?
Yeah, so as of right now, the tariffs are allowed to remain in effect. Although the Court of International Trade struck them down, the appeals court allowed them to be reinstated while it was considering this case. So unless they issue their ruling in the next 9 hours or so before midnight, those tariffs will be allowed to take effect and move forward. Then we will be in this waiting game. This is something we've heard from a number of small businesses, this uncertainty that impacts their business as to, will a court rule? Will it strike it down? How will they strike it down? What happens next? Will it get appealed to the Supreme Court? Certainly, I think it's fair to say attorneys on both sides believe that the Supreme Court will ultimately have to step in on this matter. And it's worth noting that, again, this only concerns some of the president's tariffs, those that rely on IEEPA, things like the reciprocal tariffs, things like the fentanyl tariffs intended to stop the flow of illicit opiates. Some of the other tariffs that the president has imposed on specific industries like copper or steel and aluminum are an entirely separate matter. There haven't been any specific challenges that have risen to this level there yet, so those are allowed to move forward. As of now, we heard from the press secretary earlier this morning, they are plowing ahead with the trade agenda. The president is, announcing, imposing these new tariff rates effective at 12:01 tonight, and unless the court rules then, that's how it will be until they issue their ruling. Andrew?
All right, Scripps News White House producer and reporter Jacob Garden-Schwartz for us. Jacob, thank you.